Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon. Just became afternoon here. Don't worry, Algo, it's not going to be the most exciting stream. Honestly, it's kind of a slower session. Uh, October 43 calls for, what are you talking about? Good afternoon. I mean, we had a few interesting things. Our MRK swing did really good for anyone that took those September calls. Oh. This one had some good movement. Crypto, since that bearish flip day, has just been retracting down. It kind of formed another 3-bar at a major support here. So this has been a pretty good short trade. J&J has also been continuing. So our swing trades have done pretty well, even with the market kind of going a bit sideways. These were my two favorites of the bunch. I don't know if anyone did J&J. And ES has kind of just been stuck. So let's go back to ES here. Overnight, last night, I think this is primarily due to this stalling core ranges yesterday. Excuse me, and failing to pin above. So, especially since they failed to close above this 64.22, 24 area, these neutral pins they're not bad. They still closed here at 64.14, 64.16, 75, so it's still above this little, sorry guys, neutral zone here, but there still is a tiny bit of risk. I would say that this should be a tiny bit higher. Because this can leave things two directional, which is exactly what it's doing. What do you guys notice today, though, that really stands out? I have to blow my nose. Just give me a second. What stands out to you guys here? Something very specific stands out to me. Something that could actually be looked at as being progressive from yesterday's session. Sorry, I can't stop sneezing. I have to mute myself for a bit. Sorry, I don't know why my allergies get so bad sometimes in the morning. Okay, we talked about this yesterday, but this was primarily a better spot for them to have held, especially off of the actual opening ranges, which I'm pretty sure were these ranges here, like the 3-5. Okay, so do you notice? And they held above the 66-point ranges today. And the 68. Okay. Let me know if you guys see this. These are also calculated spots right here. But do you see what I mean? These areas right here of highs and off opening range from these were more ideal that they would have held these ranges here yesterday. So they still can afford a tiny bit of risk. But I'm just trying to show you guys the did you guys see it? So, okay, so it's a little bit better, right? Because now it gives us better odds today. Do you see it? Did they even trigger that? Did they even touch that line? And you guys should know this without me even having to ask. You guys should be pointing it out. You should be saying, oh, look where we held. Oh, look where we didn't trigger. Oh, look, this is progressive. Oh, look, we have better odds of holding this time. Oh, look, this means that we can get back to get a better pin today. Like, I shouldn't have to point these things out. You guys should be pointing them out to me, especially if we spent a while yesterday discussing these ranges. So I would say this is a pretty good structural hold if they can hold here, which could help increase our odds of what? What does this increase our odds of us doing? And sorry, you guys are going to just have to ignore my allergies. That's part of the reason I don't like streaming in the morning, is I'm always so congested in the morning for some reason. Okay, so from this range right here and where they held, remember how I said we're working with about 7.5 to 8.25 points in the offset? Can this give us the range that we need on the upside? I know we're running out of time right now. It's already 2 o'clock. But aren't we already at a risk of basically... these were yesterday's opening ranges. Let me just highlight them. Yesterday's stalled real-time highs. Okay. Are we already at a risk of staying stuck sideways for 2 weeks? Didn't we talk about this? We could stay stuck back and forth between the zone and channel for 2 weeks, which is, it should be about, like I think max range, it should be about 200-ish points in range. Or 150, because it's kind of like the median between 346 and 256. So very similar period to what happened here, right? Like back here. Could happen here. And so far that's, even though it's been downside, this is still the case, right? They have odds of turning this back around if they want to, as early as when? When can they turn this back around? When can they turn this back around? have odds of staying stuck all the way till here. When can they turn this back around? Let me just delete these. Yeah, it is. It's 88 points from the weekly open. That's right. Because they started the week right here. Well, yeah, technically as early as today, if they can get us a better pin, and then tomorrow would be a very important date for us to try making a reversal. So we're currently ranging around 114, 107 points total for the week, 121. So this offset of this 7.5 points is what? What would that get us? This is from highs to lows on the week. Right here. This is the current offset we have. 7.5 points. Between 7 to 7.5 points. What was the max range that we were working with this week? Well, tomorrow's the earliest point for a turnaround. This was the better portion of the week to like have downside. Like we're better off having downside during this period than during this period here, if that makes sense. But now is there pressure for them to retrace back up and reset some of those previous conditions? These are the previous resets. Okay, I feel like you guys are very quick to forget, so okay, these are the previous resets. Could they easily reset this for today? I have to sign off early today, guys, so if I'm on stream right now, I would probably try to participate. We have to sign off in like an hour or less, actually. What's the total range that we could have for the week that we discussed? No problem, sorry, I didn't have it up right there. Yeah, so we could get up to that. So we've hit 121.5 from highs to low so far. Could they recycle that range differential on the more ideal spots that we wanted to hold on downside in terms of that? They could. It would bring it to like 129 points with that 7.5 offsetting range, because that was a little bit more ideal, just as it was on the upside, because had they held maybe closer to here, okay, we could have entered the zone. Do you see that? And that would have given us an odd of breaking back above these structures back in here. So could this offset down here essentially give us a potential probability of getting back to the zone up here? Could this be implying that, especially because it's on the 21st? Offsets in range are very important to pay close attention to. What do you guys think? So what that means is, since today's a calculated date, okay, could you, even if you retracted the same range on upside, like the 121, you'd still get an entry into the zone, okay? Could you still retract off here? You could, and that would give you odds of taking out both of these structures. Not the highest odds of taking out the high range, but it does at least put odds in play of at least getting back into a zone. I'm not really sure if it would be hawkish, like especially off these ranges down here. I think it kind of depends on price. Like I would say if they're able to actually sustain this area that I really would prefer to be our actual low points, then maybe a little bit more dovish so that we can have some retracements back up. But if they did really want to take this all the way back and break down like the 256 point ranges, then it would be a bit more hawkish. Does that make sense? Because the way that they are you guys understanding how they're formulating this? What's half of, like, if you take 246, 256, half of that range is usually 151, 152, 150.5. They're basically just holding the line right here. Do you see what I'm saying? Like around this area here. So, and that's because once we break between 635A, 6363, that's when we can come back and trigger 6251. So this is about half the range of calculated annual ranges, and specifically for Q3. Okay? And the range that we're shy on Q3 upside is closer to like these 50s up here, which really would just be the equivalent of us hitting the full range from the bottom range down here. Hello. What would trigger a big drop? I don't know. Probably failing these ranges. We're already expanding on the year. Anything above these areas here is already an expansion on the year. So we don't necessarily have to, like, anything above 1,380 points. Do you guys realize that? Anything above this range here is already an expansion on the year. So I don't even really call it a correction, because what are they correcting? They're correcting something that was already given to us at an expense. Like, another way that you can look at this, if you kind of are someone that struggles a little bit with ranges and annual ranges, is even from like the year-to-year basis, we're hovering right now just beneath that 346 range, right ahead of end of Q3. Do you see this? Like between 346 and 356. Do you see how important these spots are here? Especially from like an open-close ratio, and I'll show you. And these are why these areas are what I consider like the annual spots for the year. And they should be right around this zone. So how, okay, from a very dumbed down, this is very dumbed down, okay? You have to be able to understand it like this. From a very dumbed down approach, from last year's open to this, last year's close to this year's open, do you see how these areas here are directly correlated to like a 246 point move, okay? When we're moving in increments of thirds. Do you see this? Do you think it's a coincidence that they're trading around these price points the final upcoming week of Q3? And this is why I'm saying these are areas that could be considered an expansion, right? Or potential exhaustion. And I'll show you what they did in a second here. Okay, do you see what I mean? They're hovering this range in here, specifically on these dates, because this is what could allow us to continue, right? If they're able to sustain, but this is a pretty important breaking point if they can't. I don't really see it as either or, though. It kind of could be sideways, because they already broke the upside range, which could help offset some of the downside risk. Does that make sense? Well, I trade based off time and price, which usually aligns with whatever Fed speakers usually say. kind of hard to look at it that way when you're like a math-based trader. Because usually the price is already giving you an idea of the way it might turn out. So, and I don't think it's a coincidence that they're sitting right at the 346 point interval right before this. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I did these calculations a year ago, and these seem like they were going to be the annual ranges for this year that kind of are co-aligned with specific dates, if that makes sense. So I would say failing this range here, this would be the absolute minimum, right? If we don't close at least in the zone today, that's pretty bad. Do you guys agree? And it aligns with my overall base strategy. 63, 87, 88 is where the zone entry is. Okay, so to me that makes sense from that perspective. When you're looking at this from like a high range, so from like last year's highs, I guess, to here, this is where you could have that extension. I didn't quite look at it like this, but do you see what I mean? They definitely saved some of this range on downside, and it's not much. It's like 40 or so points, but this is what protected us basically from breaking back down into that channel. And if you actually look at this unadjusted, okay, I want to show you guys something. Okay, if you look at this unadjusted, because I know right now this is, do you see that? Do you think that's a coincidence that they held there at 3.6? My annual support here was, I think, 3.650, 3.7 or something like that. They held by like an actual hair, okay? So do you now understand what I'm saying? So they basically protected the downside here immensely back in April. These are the calculated time intervals coming up today and tomorrow and the 26th. This is the range that they kind of gave us on upside, which can help you protect the downside. I don't really know how else to say that in like a verbiage kind of way, but, and technically speaking, if you're looking at this from like the unadjusted, then there was a little bit of room, right? It's kind of hard to see right here. Like, do you see that? This is when you're looking at it like unadjusted. I know it's a little bit tricky, but it's funny how they kind of correlate like that, because if that was the case, then they'd be at risk of taking it back to the prior zone, which really would just be like taking it back to this range in here. This is probably close to, yeah, you can go back and rewatch that. It's just kind of an interesting way of looking at this to see how these ranges align. But there's a lot of confluence in here. And then unadjusted, when I looked at this from a high range, which is also kind of hard to see. We haven't quite hit that. Do you see what I'm saying? What would be your interval here if you were hitting this from like a high range? I want you guys to figure this out without me having to tell you. And I have positions on too, so I want to make sure I don't miss anything here. Okay, what do you guys notice here? See if someone can point it out. Yeah, there's something else though. I'm talking more about like the highs and lows. We looked at open and close. I'm talking more about highs and lows. There's like maybe 38 or so points left, right, between the two. Does that make sense? Usually when you get like midpoint structure breaks, it's usually at least 150 points. Okay. I noticed that if they were to bring this back, like the 183, 182 would kind of take us back to these mid structures. If they took us closer to like the 200 point ranges, then you'd kind of be hovering like a little bit in between from a high range. From like some of these closing points here, you'd kind of be like right back at these structures. But there's something specific that stands out, especially in terms of like the time intervals that we're working with. How many points are we off right now in terms of breaking some of this range? You guys probably forgot, but we had these major flip dates back here. These ones back here. Okay, do I have to just give you guys the answer, I guess? I don't know. I did notice, like, even between, like, the lows and the opening range from the year before, there was about 299 points. Close to, like, an overall, like, net differential between that 221. Close to, like, 78 or so points. I don't know if you guys can see that. Overall range was, like, 467, which I don't think we have to worry about just yet, but I did notice that between these ranges here and like where they were initially stalling, okay, so what did I say that was, 78 or so points, we're kind of trading within this range right here. Do you see that between the offsets? Isn't that really interesting? Do you see this here? Those are the offsetting ranges between highs, lows, and open and close. between the two on the downside, and it's the exact same on the upside. Yeah, or you can think of it, I guess, as it's 38 is the actual range, so it'd be 38, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm looking at it from, I'm not multiplying anything. It's the opening range to the low range between here and the high range to the high range, because I want to see what the differential is. Does that make sense? Or like what you'd need to extend basically, or break for that to be classified as an extension. So I feel like that was the minimum that they probably needed for this to potentially extend. But they didn't break this up by too much. If you look at this too from like the high range right here, I would bet money this is 38 points or 40 points. Isn't that crazy? That's pretty cool. And that's the differential between here, 183, and here, 221. Do you see it? I know this is probably going to go over some of your heads, but I just thought it was a really cool observation, because this can help us predict the range that they break in highs, okay? And the range for sustainment to come back and retest those highs. So this is extremely calculated where they broke this here. And that's why I'm not really surprised, because this also would be in alignment with our 6405, 6408, 6410. Do you see what I mean? And hence bringing it back to like these 6-9 spots, 70 spots would help reset the odds if they can sustain 6, 3, 8, 7, 8, 9, 90. And that's likely also why they initially broke right here and then stalled, because these were hitting some annual ranges, which would make this 64, 66, 65, 76 area. This is a really calculated spot. And that's essentially where they stalled this past week too here. Anyway, I just thought it was a really cool observation, because the timing of the dates being aligned right here too was also something that really stood out, because if they can sustain basically this range here, then they still have a shot of coming back to try retracing this box range here. Otherwise, it's going to keep us at risk of our annual ranges. Do you not see how these are our annual ranges? What's our annual range? 60-41, right? 60-35 area. Those are ranges that you can basically measure off of, and they should be in alignment with like roughly 1,300 or so points. Okay, so like this range in here. And I didn't see exactly where they opened, but I think it's 1380 is the exact range. Yes, which is basically where they're holding right here. Do you see this? 1380, 1379, these are annual ranges right in between here. And that's essentially where they're holding. This right here. I did talk about this last Sunday, which I'll do a big quarterly recap next week, but this is just kind of another breakdown of this, because this is a very big spot. Losing this area here, that's not a small spot to lose. Does that make sense? Like the 62, 50s, and 60s, this second time around, is what would put us at risk of coming all the way back down. But what I'm trying to say is, I think this extension here of the 346 points, do you guys realize that we're trading within the extensions above annual range? That's what I'm trying to get at. And if we look at this actually measured off of the exact spot of like that 4836 that I was telling you about, do you see how technically speaking they still protected this area a little bit right here? So does that mean that we could technically take out this range but then hold here and then still make a reversal back? This is for those that were asking about like a very bearish viewpoint on this. Could they technically take this out but then still bounce back right here off like 62.14, 62.10. Yes, because that's a huge annual range, right? So there actually is a bit of a buffer that we have that we can utilize a little bit. But that would be the area that I'd get really concerned, right? Is maybe if they failed this range here, then I'd be concerned that we'd get the full ranges back. So it's not much. It's kind of a small differential in range. These dates here, though, are the time to try to negate this. Does that make sense? So, like, if they can sustain during these next 2 to 3 days, avoiding going back to this area here, that's when they can come back and we could get that full... I don't even know, actually. I didn't measure from here, but I wonder. Yeah, this is close to that 299. Do you see that? Oh, that's actually really interesting because that 299 off that annual range is also our 65.10 area, our calculated spot. I didn't realize that. Look, that 65.10.75. That's pretty interesting. That would be like off this range here. So the neutral area is definitely a huge, huge overhead along with that 65.32, 65.20, a big spot. And losing that is what would cause bigger volatility, whereas holding this range here is what would allow for the extended moves up, if that makes sense. Okay, so right now they're basically ranging between half the range of 346 and 256, which is usually around 150, 151. I just want to see something quickly here. That's pretty aligned to where they're currently holding. Sorry, the magnet keeps dragging this down. That's interesting. So yes, holding these areas is definitely going to be pretty important, especially for today and tomorrow. And I think that's why they kept it in such an inside range. Yeah, we definitely do not want to go back here then. We 100% have to close above 63.87, 63.88 area. This area here is extremely calculated, okay? Area to pin the close. Obviously, pinning anywhere above there is going to give us a better advantage, especially considering that this is the zone. So it is really cool to see how annual ranges are also in alignment with this being the zone entry, because that kind of keeps this whole box in play. Does that help you guys a little bit? I know sometimes like we have certain catalysts and there's a lot of things going on with that, but I feel like for me it's more focused on like, well, where are they calculating this ahead of these events? Because that's probably more important. And the fact that these are also calculated dates. I know it's Powell speaking tomorrow, but the 22nd is a very important calculated time frame. Okay, so it's the price point ahead of that closing date, which would be today, can help you maybe gauge the direction and the type of range that you could expect. Are we expecting volatility tomorrow for the 22nd flip date? Just generally, like in general, like forget Powell for a second, like were we anticipating that we could see some volatility on that date? Yes. Okay, so there is a chance that there could be some volatility tomorrow. Tougher trading day? No, because we never closed above 6422, so I was expecting today to be kind of back and forth. That's the theme for the week. What was the theme for the week this week? What did I tell you guys on Sunday? And actually Friday, before the week even opened, just based on where we closed on Friday. I already knew where this was gonna head this week. Sideways, right? A lot of back and forth. Oh, I forgot I did an audio report. which I never do. How do I see the full report though? Well, sideways, depending on where in the range, a zone area is definitely a good area to go sideways and back and forth. But the key here is this, battling the two zones, okay? Kind of depends on where they hold it. They tried holding 6420s, they did. You guys saw in real time. Remember how hard they tried to hold 6420? Tried so hard, they just couldn't do it though. We already knew that this was the huge upside wall. So we knew stalling 6508, 6510 was not good, correct? That gave us high odds of them breaking this back down. We knew that if they had tried breaking 6510, 6508, and testing 6516, 21 early in the week, it'll heavily reduce odds for later in the week, which they just couldn't do. And we also know that these types of ranges here can give us some odds to reset, which could also still trigger some volatility. So that being said, that's where the 63.63, 63.66, 63.58, those ranges come back into play if they break a little bit beneath the zone. It's basically like the 88 to 132 point range for the week, okay? So obviously if they couldn't break 6510 or 6520, then they could break it a little bit lower. It's kind of like the offset that you have. Does that make sense, you guys? If those were the ranges that they were working with, so if we were looking at potentially hitting this area here, okay? And off 128 point range, let's just go with that. Then that means we would have had to hold the zone. Do you see what I'm saying? Like they couldn't have failed 6393, 96, and I told you guys that earlier this week. Like they really had to hold this area. 132 points. They really had to hold 6390. Do you see what I'm saying right here? Like off these ranges here? Like they really had to try to hold. They just couldn't quite do it. Right? So you can think of that like as being the potential offset in that range. Even if they held closer to 6420, we had odds of getting our 6550s, which we talked about. So let's go with 40. Oh wow, it is exactly 44 points. That's funny. I haven't actually done this yet. I'm just doing it right now because I am interested to see. So do you see how today has a bit of better odds? Do you see how yesterday put us at a massive risk by taking us down to 6363? Do you guys understand that concept? So this would be like closer to like here. Okay. That would be a huge risk. So us holding this range here today is extremely helpful. And we did say we're working with closer to like 45.5 point intervals, which does make sense. So I don't know. I thought that this was really cool, or a different way of viewing this. Hence this is, and we already knew that these areas were calculated, but this is also calculated off last week's open or close, sorry. And where we would have preferred they had sustained. So I think holding even 70s, 78 would have been still better, but this is still within a range that we could probably afford. But do you see how this was the offset in range and risk? So this would have been the odds had we held 6420. This would have been the odds had we held closer to like 96, 89. We could have maybe triggered the 2-7 range. This would have been the odds had we triggered closer to holding the zone at 8-8. Do you guys see this? So if they held closer in the zone, that should probably be the 22 point ratio. And yes, it is. That makes total sense. So close to here. Do you see that? So 22 point ratio from here would give us close to Oh, probably here. That would have given us probably those neutral spots, I would imagine. Like the channel. Do you see what I'm saying? These are the odds had they given us some different types of breaks in terms of extensions or off that net total 32 points in range or 132 points in range. So I would bet money that today's low, today's range right here and this low, you want to at least close at least above what? Actually, let me ask you guys that so that you guys can answer this question. Where do you think they'd want to close this? And this makes sense. Ideally, how much range, right? 22 points I feel like would put us at a huge risk still. What do you guys think would be ideal? I'm giving you guys the answer, but I want you, this isn't the answer by the way, so don't answer this answer. But this would be a minimum, but what would be ideal based on the scenario that we just looked at? Based on this. What do you think would be maybe an ideal area to close? Well, I don't know. Why 64.20? 9396 would be a minimum, but based on this that we just looked at and the risk that we had off of here, what would be an ideal area to close? It's not the best in terms of the zone range, but yeah, 6407, 6408. I think that area could actually really help us reduce that risk, right? And it's not a coincidence that they opened us around 65, 16, 17, 14, because that would then be measured off of the ideal area that we wanted to hold, which was closer to that 6396, 6369, 68, which I'm not going to go over again. You guys already know why that was the ideal area, because that was the 68-point hold, correct? That's a 66-point hold from yesterday's open, close, and highs off here, correct? I'm only going to recap that once because I feel like you guys should know this by now. Okay, but what else is this? This is also a 44-point hold off lows if they bring it back to where they opened. Do you see that? Where do they open and close? Do you think that that's a coincidence that they stalled it here today? What do you guys think? Do you think that that's a coincidence that that's where they opened today? Where do they open the actual session and close the session? Yesterday, right here. Do you think that this was a coincidence? 64, 1450, 64, 1425? No, right? These are really calculated spots. These are the 44-point holds from session open close. Isn't that crazy? So what would be the best area to pin? Give me minimum, give me mid, give me ideal, give me best. Give me all four. I want to know exactly what you guys think because this is pretty important. And they definitely could get us there. I think we have enough time. And they did a really good job of holding 8-4 here right now. And if you guys were actually listening, you'd know that 8-4 was the first calculated spot, okay? Because 8-4 would have been the 22-point interval. Is 22 points good? That wouldn't have been bad, but holding that is giving us an odd of what? Don't get this wrong. This 22-point hold right here is giving us an odd of doing what? Into the close. I have to sign off in 10 minutes, so you guys are going to be on your own. What is this giving us an odd of doing? This is the 34-point metrics right here. Okay. This is off yesterday's lows. I think this is the current 33, 34 point metric here, close to 96, 97. I'm basically giving you guys the answer, but I do want you guys to try answering this. Give me all four. Okay. Yeah, I would say minimum is definitely close to that 8.8, 8.7, 8.9. Mid is around 9.3, 9.6, right? I feel like this range here, you could probably go with, yeah, between 04 snack, like because 04 is off the actual lows from today, which is a little bit more ideal. That's like the 34-point range, 64.04, but that's also the 44-point range from the 6.3 hold. So you could go like 64.04 to 07, okay? And then the best area to pin, right, would be, of course, getting back to OR. Do you see it? Getting back to OR would give us the best odds off this low, this area here. And this was the ideal area that we wanted to hold. This helps us reset the conditions. This is helping us reset the conditions. This hold right here. When I saw someone looking for heading for a low of day, it wasn't looking for heading to low of day M-Dog. It was looking to protect failing the 22-point interval here so it can head back to OR. Does that make sense? That's what this price action is doing here. And they're trying to save this for the close. So far the way that this is structured and basing is looking pretty solid. What would be the best case scenario here? Because this is what can get us back to what? Them breaking it back from here gives us an odd of doing what? And this is what we've been wanting to do. They just haven't been able to do it. Finally getting that 6.3, 6.436, 6.437, 6.438. Do you see it? These areas here get us back to there. That would be the 66-point break. Does that make sense? And that was our previous closing points, right? Even if it got us back to 2.8, 2.9, that takes us back to yesterday's open. Do you see it? Do you see how today's lows are very calculated around yesterday's open close for both real time and the session? You have to see it, okay? Look at it. Didn't we open around 2.8, 2.875 yesterday? And didn't we open around 3.5, 6.435 the day before? Or close there? So these are very much correlated with those price points, okay? If we had the full range, which is like 88 points, that's what can get us back to the 50s, right? What's our big area? What was our first major calculated spot? This area here, right? This range here is 64, 57, 58. That's a huge calculated range. Okay. So it doesn't entirely reset the risk, but it at least gives us somewhat of an odd of getting some structural resets intact for next week even, okay? So really big areas, guys, into the close. Do you guys want... I can send you guys some of this, but at least that way you have an idea. Anything beneath 8.4 would not be good, I don't think. Like, I feel like that would be a really shitty close. But them taking it back into the zone for starters, and even from like a very base zone theory approach, it makes sense too, because getting back to 14, 16, these are neutral, which can help give you two directional breaks, right? So it can help you go from this core back to this core, which is the 64, 60s, and 70s that we failed this week. It is a pretty far-fetched because we're still pretty far away from these price points, but if we're going to just work with these types of ranges, then at least you can understand the potential kind of price action that we could look for tomorrow, right? Because I think a lot of people are expecting extremely bearish PA tomorrow, which obviously could happen depending where we close, but there's also a decent chance that they could try saving this, especially since they held 63, 69 today. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, this is a pretty good hold here, and I would have preferred to avoid going back there. So yeah, let's see. I feel like they're saving. I think it's because they know that the end of day is pinnable, so they're saving this Well, I was leaning towards upside for tomorrow if they can get this back into the zone, but they definitely need a better pin and overnight action. Like, we need to re-trigger 6420s and 30s overnight for that to be the case, because then if we reset those conditions by US Open, what time is Powell speaking tomorrow? Like, if we can at least reset these conditions, does that make sense? Like these conditions here, it really puts us at a reasonable odd. Plus, we stayed within that inside range. 10 Eastern time. Okay, yeah, so if they're able to at least get this back to this neutral range and give us even a decent odd of like retesting these areas overnight, they definitely have to retest that. If they're able to do that, then I would think that we have a decent shot of getting back that 5768, maybe the resets of 6667. That was kind of the theme for the week, is to negate on this date, right? Otherwise, that's what would trigger the bigger sell-off down. A lot of it's going to depend on where in the zone they stall. This is still a bear zone in this area here, so basically progress has to be made, if that makes sense. You can't fail 6420s this second time around, if that makes... Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't fail entering this zone overnight. You can't fail 6426. You can't fail 6432. Like, you have to break this. Yeah, ideally. You want to get out of the zone and try getting back in the channel. If we would have got back in the channel yesterday, that would have helped us a lot, right? In terms of fighting off some volatility. And remember how calculated 6436, 37, 38 were? I don't know why the 38 keeps getting deleted, but this area would help us fight off some of the risk. Plus neutral spots like 14, 16, 12, those are usually two directional. Or they imply two directional price action. So if this was ideally the downside, which would be the most calculated downside if this was the case, like holding here, then it gives us a decent shot on that upside. Does that make sense? I'm holding a 64 to 68 point range here. Do you see what I'm saying? It gives you a decent odd of getting the full structural breaks back here. So you definitely need those resets. I'm not really sure if it would give you like the full odd of breaking this high, but they're correlated around 6502, 6496, 05, 08. Do you see what I'm saying? It kind of would depend on how high they close. The closing point's really going to matter. So we'll see what they do here in the next few minutes. I wanted to see if they can at least clear 9899 before like 316, just to see if there's better odds for imbalance prints this afternoon. Because if they keep it stuck in between here, then I think we could still be at some risk into the close. Ideally, you want to get at least back above here, so we have some odds of closing at OR. What would be the even better case scenario that could so you know how I was just saying it kind of depends on the close? If they're going to give us that 68 point hold, right? And then a 68 point break, like 34.34 or 44.88, they'd have to basically close in the 20s, which I think would be a little bit hard to do. Yeah, I think that would be a little bit hard for them to do. Well, it's a pinnable close, Brendan. So, because they don't technically have to close any higher than this area here. We'd just be at a benefit if they did. So give me, rewrite these. Because I'm signing off. You guys are on your own into the close. I have to shower and get dressed. Zayana got accepted into a new school. I have to go pick up her uniform. Alright, if you guys have those imprinted in your brain, then you're going to know exactly how to... Yeah, well, I feel you, Brendan. I have some calls too, so I have a sell order and I don't think it triggered yet. It's definitely moving a little bit slow, so... Let me see. I've been doing a lot of like next day expirations this week, which have helped a lot. Oh yeah, that definitely hasn't triggered yet. Well, that's not bad though. I think I can get my sell on these. What did you trade? I had a flip here at 316, so I'll stick around. I want to just kind of see. There's some odds around this period here to clear 9.8. I figured if they can clear 9.8 during this period, then we have a pretty decent shot of at least taking out the neutral spots. Like even if it's 04, 06, 08 for today. Oh. How did you guys end up doing today though? How'd you guys trade? This is also, I think, the 32-point break from lows around here too. Trading between 24, 26-point ranges always sucks. Did they have liquidity when they broke here? Oh, not really. And then this range in here. This is a 13-point hold off lows right here. Interesting. This is 17 points right around the zone. That's cool. 24 to 29-point ratios always suck. From yesterday's lows, I'm pretty sure this is currently stalling that 34-point ratio, right? What was yesterday's exact low? I should have done a poll. How many think they're going to break the 34-point metrics? Right here. From yesterday's lows. Would be right around here. Oops. So the issue here is they've broken above, they haven't closed above. You definitely need to close above that 9675. The odds that I had were between 316 and 321. But I do have to sign off after this because I still have to get ready. Pretty big spot here. Because if they're able to break here, then it does increase our odds a little bit of getting these neutral spots. Okay, let's see. We'll do one pull before I leave and then I'll sign off. 64 or 639675 clearance, 34 points off weekly lows by 316, 321. So you definitely have to close above though. Okay. Let's get some votes on that before I sign off here. I do think that this can help determine the kind of range we might get this afternoon. Because if they end up stalling during this period here and reduce range, then they could definitely keep this a little bit limited. So far 16 getting a slight reversal back down and trying to retrace. I would think that 18 is probably the higher odd, but we'll see. They're definitely being extremely calculated about this though. So yesterday's lows when they triggered, where was the closing stick though? Because I would bet money that this is where they're stalling right now. So like off of these closing sticks here. Do you see this? That's probably where they're stalling here. All right, so obviously the kind of price action you'd want here is a hold off 16, some slight structure breaks right here, maybe a retest by 18, and then the clearance break right here. This would help us maybe get the 64, 06, 08, 04 at least. Could they keep it stuck between 8.8 and 9.8 if they wanted to this afternoon? Especially around 9.4, 9.5, 9.6, 9.7. They definitely could because they are calculated areas, but those are not really ideal from like a very base approach. I would prefer to get back to a neutral stance just because it can help us in terms of odds. So let's see what they do. I think 5, so like 2.5 minutes. Probably an overlap between 18, 19 or like the mid intervals. I just wanted to see if they'd at least retest the 9.6 to 9.675 here. Or whatever these closing points are. That's not looking too bad off 18. Well, it's stalled. $9.575 stall. I know this doesn't really look like much going on right here, but this is definitely telling us something into the close because this is a pretty important period to see if they actually want to extend range or keep it a little bit stuck this afternoon. So far they're keeping it quite stuck. Look at the reduction off 19. Do you see that? Had they broke, I think 9.6, 9.650 here, this type of range in this stick is the exact stick break you would have seen take out this 9.675 on this break right here. Probably like closer to here. Do you see that? So definitely document that. There's a bit of range reduction happening here during that period. This was the earliest period to clear this mark here. Let me just write 9.675. They have some odds of turning it back around, but it would be pretty high pressure to try getting at least back over 9.6, 9.625. Second odds were closer to some of these imbalance prints, especially if they want to keep this stuck until the close. That would be like closer to like 328, 333, 336. This is definitely a big overhead. Okay, I have to sign off, guys, so I can get dressed, but I have a sell order in case they do break this. I tried that long off that second hold this afternoon. I think you guys are pretty much aware of what the conditions are. Usually pinnable sessions, they do try to save most of the range until end of day. So, but I don't know. I feel like if they keep this stuck beneath 9.9 before like imbalance prints, do you know what I mean? Like especially between here and like 3.6, then we'd be in some trouble. I just wanted to see how this 2-1 stick behaves and if they try their best to negate some of this here. Because the issue with this is these ranges in here are pinnable. So if they want to keep it stuck here, they could. Ideally, we don't want to stay stuck here, though. It would be better if they can try getting it back to a neutral zone, which is back above 9.9, right? Neutral zone is between 9.9 and 14, so. And that would really help us in terms of structure, too, on the daily. Okay, I will see you guys tomorrow.